From 1940 to 1945, the BMW R75 with Sidecar was everywhere. Designed to give the German Army a fast, reliable, all-terrain motorcycle, it carried troops, supplies, and even mounted weapons across Europe. It achieved a reputation for toughness and engineering brilliance. Yet behind the success lay hidden problems. Critics called it over-engineered, expensive, and difficult to maintain. Soldiers relied on it, trusted it, and sometimes even loved it. But in reality, the R75 was both a battlefield hero and a logistical nightmare. These are the shocking secrets of the BMW R75 with Sidecar, the war motorcycle that climbed mountains. In 1939, as Europe plunged into the Second World War, the German Army needed a new kind of vehicle. Cars were too large and fuel-hungry, horses were outdated, tanks were expensive and slow to produce. What the Wehrmacht wanted was mobility. Motorcycles had already been tested in the First World War, where dispatch riders carried urgent messages under fire. But by the late 1930s, simple two-wheeled machines could not cope with rough terrain. Germany turned to its most advanced motorcycle manufacturer, Bayerische Motorenwerke, or BMW. The answer was the R75. Introduced in 1940, it was more than a motorcycle. With its heavy sidecar-driven wheel and rugged frame, it was a three-wheeled war machine. The R75 was built for a single mission: conquer the terrain where no ordinary motorcycle could ride. The first secret of the R75 was its weight. On paper, it seemed unbeatable. With a powerful 745 cubic centimeter boxer engine and sidecar drive, it could climb steep hills, cross rivers, and even tow small artillery. But what it lacked was lightness. The R75 weighed over 420 kilograms fully equipped. Add a crew, weapons, and supplies, and the machine became heavier than some compact cars of its day. In reality, this meant trouble. On narrow mountain trails, soldiers struggled to maneuver it. In deep mud or snow, the motorcycle sank and became trapped. The most obvious example was in the Eastern Front. Ask almost any German soldier who served there what frustrated them most, and many would say the R75 was powerful, but once stuck, it needed multiple men to drag it free. The reason was simple. BMW had designed the R75 with an engineer's perfection in mind, not a soldier's rough reality. What should have been a nimble scout vehicle often became an immovable steel anchor. Its weight gave it stability, but it also crushed its promise of true mobility. The second problem was hidden under the frame: mechanical complexity. The R75 was a masterpiece of engineering. Its sidecar wheel was powered by a drive shaft linked to the rear wheel, creating two-wheel drive. It even had a differential like a car. Few motorcycles before or since have matched such innovation. But what it lacked was simplicity. Each part of the R75 demanded precision. Hundreds of components had to work together. A small failure could immobilize the entire machine. In reality, this was a soldier's nightmare. Wartime conditions meant dust, mud, and snow clogged the gears. Oil froze in winter. Bearings cracked under stress. The most obvious example was on the Russian steppe, where freezing temperatures destroyed lubricants. Soldiers would spend hours in the cold dismantling gearboxes just to keep the motorcycle moving. Ask almost any mechanic in the field what frustrated them most, and the answer was clear. Repairing the R75 was not just difficult, it was exhausting. The result was predictable. While the R75 was admired, it was also cursed. It could carry men into battle, but it could just as easily leave them stranded. The third hidden truth was economic. Each BMW R75 was expensive. At nearly 2,600 Reichsmarks per unit, it cost more than some small cars of the era. What it lacked was affordability. Germany's war economy was stretched thin. Every tank, plane, and rifle required resources. Producing a complex motorcycle with hundreds of precision machine part-strained factories. In reality, this meant fewer 75s could be built than planners wanted. Only about 16,500 were produced during the war. Compare this to the Allies, who built millions of cheap Jeeps and motorcycles. The most obvious example was the American Willys Jeep. Simple, rugged, and mass-produced, it cost a fraction of the R75. While German troops relied on a few thousand heavy sidecar rigs, the Allies flooded battlefields with countless Jeeps. Ask almost any historian what frustrated German strategists most, and they will point to this imbalance. The R75 may have been superior in design, but its cost drained resources, while its rivals overwhelmed the battlefield in numbers. In the end, the R75 stood as a symbol of German engineering brilliance and of the dangerous price of perfectionism. Another hidden problem of the BMW R75 was fuel. On the drawing board, its 26-horsepower engine seemed efficient for a military motorcycle. But in the field, consumption told a different story. What it lacked was economy. The R75 burned nearly 8 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers, a shocking figure when supply lines were already stretched thin. Add rough terrain, heavy loads, and long marches, and fuel demands doubled. In reality, this meant disaster during long campaigns. On the vast steppes of Russia, convoys of fuel trucks had to follow the R75s. When supplies failed, the motorcycles stopped cold. The most obvious example was in 1942 during the German advance towards Stalingrad. Units equipped with R75s found themselves stranded not because of enemy fire, but because their fuel barrels ran dry. Ask almost any veteran who rode one what frustrated them most, and many would recall this. The R75 could take you anywhere, but only if you had the fuel to feed it. Its thirst was legendary, and it proved fatal in campaigns where every drop of gasoline mattered. The R75 was advertised as all-terrain. With two-wheel drive, a locking differential, and low-range gears, it could tackle obstacles that no ordinary motorcycle could dream of. But what it lacked was adaptability to extremes. In reality, not all terrain was equal. Sand, snow, and deep mud exposed its limits. Heavy weight pressed its narrow tires deep into soft ground. Once bogged down, even its advanced drive system could not pull it free. The most obvious example was the North African desert. Under blazing heat, the R75 struggled through dunes. Engines overheated. Tires sank. Soldiers often abandoned the motorcycle and walked, cursing the machine that was supposed to save them. Ask almost any soldier from the Africa Corps what frustrated them most, and many would admit, the R75 could climb mountains. But the desert humbled it. It was a machine built for Europe's roads and forests, not for endless sands or frozen tundra. In the harshest battlefields, terrain defeated technology. Secret 6. The replacement that stole its glory, approximately 80 to 90 seconds. The final secret of the R75 was not mechanical, but historical. For all its brilliance, the R75 was doomed by time. By 1943, the tide of war was turning. Germany could no longer afford such expensive machines. In reality, the R75 was replaced by simpler, cheaper vehicles. The Volkswagen Kübelwagen, a light military car, performed many of the same duties at a fraction of the cost. Meanwhile, Allied jeeps flooded the battlefield, proving more versatile and easier to repair. The most obvious example was in Normandy, 1944. While German units struggled with a few remaining R75s, American troops landed with thousands of jeeps, overwhelming the landscape with speed and numbers. Ask almost any historian what sealed the R75's fate, and they will say it was brilliant, but obsolete. Its engineering was admired, but its glory was stolen by simpler, more practical machines. The R75 ended not as a triumph, but as a relic of Germany's obsession with complexity. Despite its flaws, the BMW R75 left a lasting mark on history. Photographs of the motorcycle with its sidecar remain iconic symbols of World War II. To this day, collectors pay fortunes for restored examples. In reality, the R75 became more than a machine. It became a story of innovation, of failure, of ambition that outpaced practicality. The most obvious example of its influence lies in post-war motorcycle culture. Surplus 75 euros spread across Europe, used by farmers, police, and adventurers. Some were even exported overseas, where they became prized curiosities. Ask almost any motorcycle enthusiast today what fascinates them most, and they will mention the R75's unique engineering, its drive system, its military ruggedness, its unmistakable silhouette. What it lacked in battlefield success, it gained in cultural immortality. The R75 remains a symbol of the era, a machine that climbed mountains but could not climb out of history's shadow. When we look back at the BMW R75, we see more than steel, pistons, and gears. We see an era where armies believed technology alone could win wars, an era where engineers sought perfection even when the battlefield demanded simplicity, an era when the roar of engines replaced the gallop of horses and mobility became the key to strategy. The R75 was born into this moment. It was admired for its engineering. A motorcycle with two-wheel drive, a locking differential, and low-range gears. It was unlike anything else in its time. It could climb mountains, ford rivers, and pull weapons behind it. But what it lacked was balance between brilliance and practicality. In reality, every advantage came with a cost. Its power came with weight. Its precision came with complexity. Its speed came with thirst for fuel. The most obvious example of this imbalance is the comparison with the Jeep. The Jeep was crude, but effective. The R75 was elegant, but overburdened. Ask almost any military historian today which vehicle changed the war, and the answer is unanimous: the Jeep. The BMW R75 was respected, but it never became decisive, and yet it remains unforgettable. For veterans who once rode it, memories of the R75 bring mixed emotions. Some recall the frustration of breakdowns, the long hours of freezing repairs, the endless need for fuel. Others remember it fondly as a loyal machine that carried them across impossible terrain, a partner that shared danger and survival. Collectors today restore the R75 with reverence. At military museums and classic motorcycle shows, crowds gather around it. Children stare at its heavy sidecar. Enthusiasts marvel at its engineering. It has become a symbol, not of victory, but of ambition. What the R75 teaches us is timeless. Technology alone is never enough. Perfection on paper must survive the test of reality. And in war, as in life, the simplest solution often triumphs over the most complex. If the R75 had been lighter, cheaper, and simpler, would history have been different? We will never know. What we do know is this: the BMW R75 remains a legend, a machine that climbed mountains but could not climb out of its own shadow.